Hello, welcome to the European Open briefing for Wednesday, February the 22nd. I'm Rafi Boyajian, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be taking a look at what's happening in the currency markets today. So the dollar is a little bit weaker today, despite some hawkish remarks by Fed speakers yesterday. There's some cautiousness ahead of the publication of the FOMC meeting minutes, but also the yen got a bit of a boost this morning by comments from the Bank of Japan Governor Haruhiko Kuroda, who signaled that rates in Japan are unlikely to be cut further into negative territory. In other currencies, the euro hit a 6-week low on those lingering concerns about the upcoming elections in Europe, particularly in France. The Aussie was boosted this morning after the RBA governor suggested that rates will probably not be cut further in Australia, while the Mexican peso was one of the biggest movers yesterday after the Mexican central bank offered to sell 20 billion US dollars in currency hedges as an alternative to using its foreign exchange reserves in supporting the peso. The peso had surged by around 2% against the US dollar after that announcement. But let's begin with the dollar-yen pair. We can see here the dollar had been moving higher until midday yesterday. It picked around 113.80 yen. It got some support from more hawkish remarks by the Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester, who said that the US economy is on a sound footing. We also heard once again from the Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker, who pretty much repeated what he had been saying recently, that he supports a rate hike as early as March. Although another Fed speaker, Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari, was a bit more dovish. He's said he thinks the US labor market has a bit more room to run before it reaches full employment. But much of the focus, though, is on the FOMC meeting minutes. Investors will be looking to see whether or not a March rate hike is on the cards, but also on whether or not the Fed did discuss reducing its massive balance sheet. There had been some talk in the market that the Fed could soon begin to start. It would stop reinvesting when its current holdings of U.S. government bonds expire. Moving on now to the yen and what Kuroda said. Here we can see in the chart the yen against the euro and the pound. We can see that the pound had been gaining against the yen recently, while the euro had actually been declined even before today's remarks. Bank of Japan governor said that rates are unlikely to be cut lower. Although he did express the bank's readiness to ease further if necessary, he added that with economic growth accelerating, the chance of deepening negative rates is low, and that's been pretty much the view that the markets had been taking in recent weeks. But having said that, Kuroda did say that the Bank of Japan is unlikely to tighten policy anytime soon, as inflation is still some distance away from its 2% target. Moving on to the euro now, we can see that the euro has been in decline this week, both against the dollar and the pound. It hit a 6-week low of just about $1.05, while against the pound it hit a 2-month low of just about 0.84 pounds. Yesterday we had a very strong Eurozone flash PMIs for February, but this didn't really do much in lifting the euro, as markets are more concerned about what's happening in the French elections. The polls out of France continue to show that the far-right leader Marine Le Pen is gaining more support, is actually increasing her lead, at least in the first round of voting against her rivals, and that's unsettling the markets because of the potential threat to France leaving the euro if Le Pen was to win the elections in April. Let's move on to the Australian dollar now. We had the RBA Governor Philip Lowe speaking earlier today in Sydney. He was concerned about the rising household debt in Australia, and that seems to be the main factor in preventing the RBA from cutting rates further, even though inflation is still below its target band. Having said that, he doesn't see a high risk of low inflation developing into lower inflation expectations, and he also thinks that wage growth has bottomed out. We did have some wage growth data out of Australia which showed annual wage growth at 1.9% in the fourth quarter of 2016. That's unchanged from the previous quarter, so it pretty much supports the fact that wage growth has possibly bottomed out in Australia. But for now, Philip Lowe is more concerned about the possible risk to the financial risks from rising debt levels in Australia. So markets are now pretty much low there was in terms of a rate cut by the RBA anytime soon, and we can see that the Aussie spiked up to 0.77 versus the US dollar earlier today. Let's have a quick mention for the Mexican peso, because we can see that sharp drop for the US dollar against the Mexican peso. The Mexican peso hit its highest since November 10. That was soon after the US elections. It rose over 2% to 19.92 per US dollar. We know that the peso had already been under pressure from the elections because of the possible threat of Donald Trump imposing trade tariffs on Mexican goods. Mexico relies heavily on US trade, so that such a move would have a big impact on the Mexican economy, and the Mexican central bank had been struggling to defend the peso. So yesterday it announced its first move to auction 20 billion in US dollars in foreign exchange hedges as an alternative to using its foreign reserves to support the peso, and it seems to have had some positive effects so far, because we can see that the peso did gain against its US counterpart. Let's have a quick look at today's economic calendar. We can see there the Australian data this morning. We also had some construction data out of Australia as well, which came in a little bit weaker than expectations. The main focus in the European session will be the German IFO business survey. We're also going to have the second estimate of UK GDP growth for the fourth quarter. And we're also going to see the final inflation readings out of the Eurozone for January, whereas in the US session we're going to have some housing data, and in Canada we're going to have retail sales figures for December. In terms of speakers, we're going to have the Fed's Jerome Powell appearing later in the day. Also the Bank of England's MPC member Shafiq will also be speaking. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.